In 1998, I was in Ayacucho in Peru, in the Andes. It was during a theater group meeting, and apart from this meeting where various groups were participating, at 7 a.m, I decided to have a meeting of the Magdalena Project. The Magdalena Project is a network of women that work in contemporary theater. During one of these meetings, I could see that many of the women were crying. And they would cry and they would say, "I want to speak, but I can't. I would like to say something. I've got things to say, but I can't speak." It's because something is like blocked inside and I don't manage to get it out. I would wait a bit of time and with the tears allow the women to speak. It's as if they thought that the tears should not be shown. But in the moment in which they began to say what they had to say, even though they were crying, it's as if they got courage. What they were saying was, we don't want to be strong. This idea of strength which comes from the culture that we have received. We want to keep on being like we are, with our vulnerability, with our particular way of being as women. But even like this, we want to be able to have our space, to conquer our space and speak. Many years before, in 1987, I was in the south of India, in Kerala, and there I was taught a song. I decided to use this song for a scene. I saw the outlines of a human figure come. He didn't do anything to me. He didn't do anything to me, but perhaps, who knows, maybe he seduces me in his reality of which only memories remain. No. The mind denies what the senses perceive. The senses perceive silence. When I learned this song, I learned it out of the context of theater. I learned it in a place where I did not have to demonstrate that I was an actor. I did not have to have a technique. I did not have to convince spectators. I just learned the song. And suddenly I heard a voice which was very different. It was not the voice which I had used many times before in theater performances, but it was a more personal voice. It was something that I recognized my own, even though I was singing. From that day, I started working with the voice, and it grew. And people that could recognize the difficulties that I have, a voice which trembles, a voice which cracks, would always come after the performances and say that my voice touched them. And it was then that I realized that what was my vulnerable point, my weak point, was in fact something that was strong, was something that I could offer other people, maintaining my humanity, maintaining who I was as a person, and not showing something which was technical, but was distant from me. I think that these two experiences, which I have told you, one with the voice and one with the convincing the women who were crying to speak, have helped me recognize what I call the power of vulnerability, which is something that we can conquer through our personal way of being. The Magdalena Project is a network which started in 1986. In 1983, there was a theatre group meeting in Italy, and during this meeting we were working on a performance together. We were enjoying the process of working together, and one day during a pause we said to each other, yes, we want to have another meeting like this. We want to meet again. But we said the next time we will not invite the whole group. We will invite just the people that we like of the groups. And when we said this, we realized that the people that we liked were the women of the groups. At that time, many of the groups had very strong actresses that in the performances were very convincing. Usually the groups had male directors, but the women were like those who were curious, those who had questions, those who wanted to meet and to exchange. So Jill Greenhalgh from Cardiff Laboratory Theatre at the time decided to organize a festival, a meeting, and she called it the Magdalena Festival because at that time she was working on the figure of Magdalena. After this festival, which was a normal festival with workshops, performances, lectures, at the end we were working on a performance together, and at the end many of the women said, we want to continue, we want to meet again. What they felt was a great solidarity, and that they could go back to their mixed groups feeling stronger, that their questions, their doubts, their uncertainties, they felt that they shared with many other women, and they could go back to their groups feeling stronger, that they were not alone. So the Magdalena Project continued with different events. I organized things in Denmark, and you're seeing some of the photographs which were taken during the Transit Festival, which is organized in Denmark, at Originates in Holstebro. And also Jill continued some activities in Wales, in Cardiff. Many of the activities had to do with the voice, because always during these meetings, the women would share moments of singing and active workshops with voice. Others had to do with the pedagogy, the passing on of experience. The fact that when I made a review, a magazine of the Open Page, one of the magazines that I do with the Magdalena Project, and I made one issue which was on generations, and I asked about images for the master, the passing of knowledge. Still the image was of an old man with a beard sitting under a tree. And I was asking myself, why is it that the master has to be an old man with a beard? Why is it not a woman? And so the pedagogy has always been important, and how we can also transform the language. Pedagogy giving a reference of women with more experience to younger women who are starting to make theatre, and also international, the fact that always during these meetings there is international presence coming from very different countries. This is something that we learned from the very first festival. Like the word feminism can mean something totally different in North America, where maybe at the time to throw away makeup was something that the feminists wanted, and at the time Eastern Europe, where to have makeup was a great sign of liberation. So to recognize that words are not always something which bring together, but that the actions that we do through theatre can bring us together despite words which divide. When we had a big crisis, the theme that you've been talking about today, was at the moment when in Wales we lost the grant for the Magdalena project, and Jill moved from Cardiff to a smaller village in the north. We lost the office, and we thought that at that moment the heart of Magdalena was dying, maybe the whole project would finish. But in fact that was a moment in which it started developing in a different way. Many festivals and events started happening in other parts of the world, in New Zealand, in Australia, in Argentina, in Peru, in Singapore, in India, in Canada, in the United States, in Cuba. And suddenly it was as if the fact of missing a center transformed so that the centers appeared in very different parts of the world. We started writing. This also comes from my own personal experience, being part of Originates, of a group which travels a lot abroad, and many times during our tours, Eugenio Barba, our director, will make lectures, conferences about theatre history, and during the conferences he will talk about Artaud, Grotowski, Stanislavski, Copeau, and I always wonder, where are the women in this list of people that make theatre history? Why are the women absent? And I got the answer once when Sanjukta Panigrai, the Indian dancer who started the ISTA, the International School of Theatre Anthropology, together with Eugenio Barba and many other scholars and artists, when she died much too young, I felt that I needed to let her life continue. I wanted that what her magic, her way of performing, her way of being should continue. And so I wrote an article about her using many of her words. And I sent this article to a magazine, a theatre magazine, international, and the director of this magazine wrote to me, yes, the article is very good, I like it, I enjoy it, it is well written, but I cannot publish it. I cannot publish it because it is too personal. And it was at that moment that I realized why women are absent from theatre history, because the language they use is personal. And it was from there that I started trying to build a new language of women in theatre, using their own experiences. So also asking women who were practitioners, who are working in the craft, in the practice, to write. Of course, and here again comes the crisis, I would make the proposition, I would give a theme. It could be theatre, women and myth, theatre, women and text, theatre, women and trespass, theatre, women and lives. And the women would answer me, yes, of course, I want to do it. Yes, I want it. It's a very good idea. I will send you my article. And then the deadline would come and the articles would not arrive. And I would ask what happened, and they would say, oh, I wrote, but it was not good enough. I threw it away. So then I would ask them to take the article out of the waste paper basket, open it again, and start working on it. It is as if we think that we are geniuses and we can suddenly write articles and use our own language without working on it. And it is very strange because when we work on our performances, we know that we don't have a result immediately. It is something which needs a lot of work. And it is the point of crisis in our work in theatre that teaches us that it is from there on that something happens to our work and that we know we can transform it. So with the articles, it is this moment, the moment when you think, no, it is not good, that you have to take it up and you have to start working on it and finding this language. It is not something which comes by itself. Another moment of crisis was in fact a celebration. It was after 10 years of the Magdalena Project, and Jill organized a festival in Cardiff in '94, and there the women were not crying anymore. They were dancing, laughing, singing. They were celebrating what they have achieved. But what was incredible was to see that many of the men were crying. And I felt that it was an enormous achievement that we had created an environment which was secure enough, that gave a feeling of confidence, which was strong enough for men even to show their vulnerability. The men that were accompanying us in these festivals, many times they pretend to be technicians or only to have the possibility to be there. Now, in many of the festivals that we organize, I can notice that there is a lot of interest in many of the men who come to these festivals. The last festival that I did in Denmark, the Transit, the theme was Crises. I was interested in developing this theme of how crisis is in fact the moment of finding a new way out. But what really hit me during this festival was the presence of violence. Not only the violence that many women are being victims of in society, but also the violent way with which many women are answering. This transit was dedicated to Erika Ferrazza, who is an actress, an Italian actress, who was killed by her husband. This I felt important, this dedication, because many times we feel that this kind of problem is not something that belongs to our intellectual, cultural, artistic environment, but it is something which is outside. But no, it is very close to us. And during the festival, we saw some of the documentaries of the Femen movement, the movement of women which started in Ukraine, that many of you will know because of their bare breasts when they do some of their actions. And what really struck me was this presence of violence. How the feeling I have is that within the growing of women, in the conquering of their autonomy, the conquering of this power of vulnerability, it has created an imbalance in our different societies, where the roles are no longer secure, are no longer, one does no longer know where to put our feet. And this provokes at times an answer which is violent. And there I feel that as women who work in theatre, we have an enormous responsibility, partly because we know the language of our bodies. We know a language which is not only the mind, the awareness, the consciousness, the words, but it is something which is also based on intuition, like an intelligence which does not only use the consciousness, but also an intelligence which is rooted in the body. It is rooted in a way of thinking where opposition is necessary. In words, opposition does not help, but in theatre, you need opposition. That is where you have the drama. That is where you can create something. That is where something is born, when there is the opposition. The opposition is also technically how you are present on stage through a resistance. This language of the body, which women know, also gives you the capacity of reacting to different things at the same time, of being able to think in different directions at the same time, of being able to do different things at the same time. And this is something which also the actor needs to know, and it is an experience that we have on stage. And there I feel that women have an enormous responsibility because of this knowledge and because of being able to transform something also in the societies, the communities where we live. When I am asked about the Magdalena Project, I try to explain. A lot of people ask me, how can I participate? How can I be part of it? How can I make contact? And all the contacts always go through personal relationships. The Magdalena Project is not a festival which is a possibility to present your performance like a market. No, it is a place where everyone has to work, engage, take responsibility, do. So if you want to be part of it, you need to create something yourself. If you want to invite some women to your country, you have to make the conditions for this to be possible. And I talk about the Magdalena as a network. The net can be made of lines. If you think of a fisher, the net used for fishing, you have the lines that create the net. But the Magdalena Project is the space in between. So the lines of the net can be the events, the performances, the women participating, workshops, lectures, but it can also, what makes the sense of this network is the space in between the lines. And this is open, it is empty, but it is empty to be filled with the sense that each of us can give. And it is, of course, very different, the sense that I can give in a festival in Denmark to a festival which is created in Cuba or a festival which is created in India. Every place has its own necessity and its own urgent questions. And how we fill those spaces is our own path. When I think of my own experience, and I try to explain it and to talk about it, I know that I always have to go back to what I know as an actress. There is where my feet stand. It is as if when I work as an actress, I know that I get power from the earth, it goes through me and goes out. I am like a moment of passage for this to happen. This has been taught to me, especially with the vocal work. And so I would like to just tell you what I know in a language which is not necessarily made just of words, but also of sounds and music.
E siccome non c'erano più speranze di pace, dopo 4 primavere saldato tirò le conseguenze ed era a volle cadere, ma la guerra non era ancora in porto. Per questo al Kaiser spiacque che il suo soldato se ne fosse morto e in anticipo gli parve. Mentre l'estate si univa le smosse ed il soldato battevano giù, la commissione medico-militare unitata si mosse, la commissione medico si spinse sino al cimitero e di seppellì convenga benedetta il defunto guerriero. The raven himself is horse that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan. Under my battlements, calm, ye spirits that tend on mortal thoughts. Unsex me here, and fill me from the ground to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the axis, and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shape my full purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. Bow to my woman's breast, and take my milfog, you murthering ministers, wherever in your sight the substance in you wait on nature's mischief. Casito la renecato mata morrata! Ito domasi croscitu, o re mannai, reteca ai, shandaga inda, reteca pa, reteca ai, sita ita re.
visto! Capre! Mora! L'ho visto! I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seawards on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back, when the wind blows the water, white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, with seagulls wreathed in seaweed, red and brown, till human voices wake us, and we drown. The power of vulnerability means a lot of work, and I think that the women have to guide this work. Said that I am also available to answer questions, and as it does not happen very often that Originates is in Slovenia, maybe you want to use the opportunity to ask questions. And I imagine, I don't know if you've been doing everything in English, right? But if people would like to speak Slovene, I'm sure somebody can translate. How did I join Oilin?
What happened before? What happened when you joined them? What were the key moments?
Right, it's very long ago. When I was 17, when I was 17 years old, I got fed up of being at school. I got fed up of sitting at a table studying. And so I started working, and I started going to classes in the evening. And one of the classes I went to was, I was studying German, and beside me was a young boy who said he was doing underground theater. Now, I was living in Italy, in Milan, and underground was not a word which one used a lot in those days, because it was more a time of political, of revolution, and one didn't talk about underground. So I was curious, and I went to see the rehearsals. It was in a garage. I saw the rehearsals, and I was more curious, so I went back again. And the second time I went back, they put a mask on my face, and they said, do this, do that. And I started making theater. It was not something that I decided, but it was like decided for me. Then I worked for quite a long time with this group, and when I was 22, in 1976, Originates came to Italy, and at the time I was working in a squatted house where we had a cultural center and where we had a school for theater, for music, for art, graphics and film. And there were many, many young people coming to this school. And we asked one of the actors of Originates to come to give a workshop. I took part in the workshop, and then I asked if I could go to Denmark for a period of time to learn, because my idea was that I would learn everything and I would go back to my colleagues in Italy. I stayed 3 months in Denmark, and the only thing I learned was that I didn't know anything, and that it was impossible for me to go back to Milan and continue what I was doing in a way that I felt was a complete lie, because it was only based on enthusiasm and ideology. So I decided to stay, and I'm still there. Important moments. In the beginning, when I was there, Eugenio Barba, the director, did not need any new actors. And so he did not consider me as a possible future pupil. There was a system in that time that some of the elder actors could adopt younger actors. And so Tage Larsen, one of the actors, adopted me together with another, Francis Pardayan, an American, while Eben had 3 other pupils. I stayed working with Tage for a whole year, and then there was a moment that the group was separated for 3 months. When we came back, Eugenio said that we were all part of Originates, so I officially became a pupil. And one usually is a pupil for 4 years. In the beginning, for me, it was to learn to be present on stage. It was to learn to modulate my energy. Then came a time in which I started working on solo performances, and so it was learning how to put material together, create. And now, after 38 years, I think it is more trying to unlearn what I know, to try and find a curiosity again towards the work. In the beginning, I felt that for me it was important to be whole, like not divided between mental feelings, sensations, body, but to be whole. Then one day when I was in Peru and I was talking to many younger people, trying to explain the work on the voice, I suddenly realized that what I wanted was to be divided, but divided amongst all of them who were listening to me. So it's like also your motivations change a lot in the course of your experience. Magdalena, in the beginning, for me, was a way of being Julia without being Julia of Originates. So it was a moment of being away from the group. Then slowly, also because of the festival I do, Transit at Originates, Magdalena has become a big part of the identity of Originates. So it has met in a completely different way. And now many of the contacts and the network that we have at Originates are many of the women which I have met through the Magdalena. And also the voice work that I have developed also thanks to this network.
It's amazing that you have so many performances live. I mean, that you're still, whatever you're doing at Holding Theatre, and for the whole time, all the performances which are still alive are the original crew?
I came today because yesterday we were finishing an Odin Week festival. During the Odin Week festival, we present most of the productions that we have on repertory and work demonstrations. And there are The Chronic Life, The Great Cities Under the Moon, Ode to Progress, Inside the Skeleton of the Whale, and The Whispering Winds, which are group ensemble performances. In them, there are actors that have started in 1964, others who came in 1966, and then there are other actors like Roberta, who came in 1974, myself, who came in 1976, Tage, who was in 1972. So there are some of the original and some that have come later. There are two actresses, well, one musician and one actress, who came in 2006, and they are the youngest of the group.
I thought so. There are the students that want to work with you and Eugenio Barba on the performances, and probably they're all, I don't know, I'm just guessing, directors, in a way they want to pass through their work. So it will remain when they won't be alive anymore. So
that is what we're working for, yes. In a very different way, and with a very different name, and yes, we will pass it on.
I have a question.
You also need to, the acoustics here is pretty terrible. So you need to speak up.
Before, when I was watching the movie, and also now when you were performing, I was fascinated by the ease of the performance, or the ease of the actors there. I was fascinated by that, because in Slovenia usually it's, actors, also the productions are, it's performance, it's kind of, a different state that the performers are in. And I was just questioning myself, what is the process behind this, that you remain that ease? I mean, what is the process of the rehearsals when you are exploring relationships between the actors and then the transition into the performance? How do you keep this ease, or how do you keep this vividness, or do you know what I mean? What is the process, or how do you work?
With the training, we learn to be present on stage. This means also that you're using much more energy than in daily life. So it's not that you are saving energy, which is what you try to do in the everyday life outside, but when you're making theater, because what you're doing has to be visible and perceived by a spectator, you have to use much more energy. You have to learn to modulate this energy. Many people, when they start, think that this tension is a tension in the extremities. And you will often see young actors with very tense hands and a lot of faces. The tension is something which has to move in your body, so not remain as a cramp, and should be in your torso and not in the extremities. The extremities give the precision of what you are doing, but they don't carry the strength. So what you see as ease is in fact a lot of work. But Now, it seems as if outside it is very, but here it's working like crazy. So that is, the ease is hiding an enormous engagement of the body. Then there is another way I could answer. It is also a question of rehearsals. When we make a performance, when we create a performance, what we are rich in is time. So we rehearse for 6-7 months for an ensemble production. And every day we go through all our scenes, all our material, which means that our body knows what we're doing. We don't have to think what we're doing because our body knows. This means that there is not a separation between the intention and the doing. We sometimes make the example of two cowboys at a duel. Who wins? Not the person who decides to take out the gun, but the person who has to react and is decided. So it's much faster. So through all the rehearsals, our body learns to make the performance. And then that means that when we are actually performing, we can also be aware of everything else which is around. So the spectators, the change of space, the acoustics, the different languages, and we can concentrate on other things as well. And there is another answer, which has to do with the proximity. We do performances for 100, 150 people, and we have our spectators close. That means that you can perceive the changes in my body, which if you were 20 meters away, you would not perceive. Actors who work in theaters which are very big amplify in a way that they lose some of the small variations that you can have when the spectators are close. And this is also true for the voice. With the voice, if I speak to you here, it is different than if I had to place my voice to speak in a much bigger space. There I would lose some of the vibrations which give a character to my voice.
May I ask, how much time do you spend in theater, rehearsing daily, for example?
It depends if we are performing, if we are on tour, if we are creating a performance. But our days are very long. When I arrived at the theater, we started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we would finish at 6 in the evening. We started at 7 because that was the time that the workers started. Then when some of the actors had children and the children were going to school, we would start when the school started, so at 8 o'clock. And the actors who had children could leave at 4. If we perform, then we usually work in the morning, rest in the afternoon, and then for the performance we can come 2-3 hours before, have the performance, and then we clear up afterwards. If we are rehearsing or creating a new performance, then usually we have a time for the actors, which we call training, or we've given it different names, and then we go in, which can last 2 hours, and then we go to the rehearsal space, and then we work.
So this training, is this, I wanted to ask you if, do you have any ritual that you, with which you start rehearsals?
No. Our rituals have to do with very practical things. The space has to be clean. So we clean the theatre. Our costumes have to be ironed. We iron our costumes. Our objects have to be looked after, so we put them where they have to be. That is part of our ritual. So it's not exercises or things, it's more very concrete actions which you repeat. So the ritual is a repetition of a structure.
You do that by yourselves, ironing, cleaning?
Yes. You mean if we do it? Yes, we don't have cleaning people or ironing.
And is Eugenio the only director?
Nearly all the actors, or at least the elder actors, also direct. Like I direct quite a lot, but I direct outside the group.
I mean,
In the group, no, the Originates are the performances directed by Eugenio and made by the group of actors that have been. There is one performance, which is Esther's book, which has been directed by Iben, one of the actresses. And then there are a lot of other activities that we direct, which can be street performances, barters, performances that we do also with other people. There are situations like we have, every month we have a poetry evening, or we have another which we call Here Once Upon a Time, which is done in town, which actors direct. So and many of the films that are done at Odin are directed by one actor, Torger Vetal, or by other people that participate. So the director of the performances is usually Eugenio, but there are other people who direct other situations within the group.
I have a question. You said that you have been acting for 38 years. How do you maintain the relationships in the ensemble, because you have been for this long with the same people? How do you get along?
Well, we've actually been together for 50 years. This year we have the 50th anniversary. One of the things which is important to maintain a group is that you don't think that in the group you have to equal the individualities, but in fact that you have to make the individuals much stronger in their differences. This means that the individuals keep on being interesting one for the other as they grow. Although we know each other very well, each of us has a lot of strategies to find something that will surprise the director and the other actors. So at times it can be to travel to a country and learn something different or be inspired by a different genre of theatre, or it can be simply finding different texts or different music, or following your own curiosity with something, with a problem, a theme, a task. At times, it has also been the fact that we are an important reference for other groups in the world that keep us together. This was like when we were after 30, 35 years of work, we would recognize that many other people would look at us and know that because we kept on, they would think it is possible. And so that became important for us to keep on. Because if we stopped, then a lot of others would think that it was not possible.
But did you perceive that as a burden, or?
No, it gives you motivation. It gives you like a meaning to keep on. Now I feel that I saw an exhibition of Picasso once in New York. It was Picasso, the paintings he did after he was 80. And I could see that he no longer had to show anybody that he was a good painter. He just had fun with his paintings and did whatever he felt like. I mean, completely. And I feel that we are like entering that phase. That we no longer have to demonstrate anything. Like we've done enough of that, so now we can just have a bit of fun.
I was thinking about the Magdalena Network. The Magdalena Network. Have you sort of noticed a change in attitude towards sort of female playwright, or sort of the use of vulnerability as a means of
yes,
using the voice in that kind of aspect?
Yes, and since we started in '86, there's been an enormous change, partly of awareness of the problem, because still many of the directors are not women, many of the leaders are not women, or still many of the salaries are not good enough. Yeah. But it's as if the women have conquered a lot of autonomy in their work, and so are able to create spaces also for themselves and follow what they want. So not trying to comply with something which existed and which was demanded of them, but to follow their own needs. And so to come with a different proposal, with a different way of seeing, of perceiving. And that is where I say that I feel that in this conquest we have created an imbalance. And right now I feel that this imbalance is creating a violence, which of course is a task that we have to assume to find out how to go on.
Yeah.
There is an actor in Balkans with whom I would actually dare compare your performance that you made now with. But his name, his name is Radosh Apeja. Maybe this does not ring the bell to you, but his name, and I think that speaking of vulnerability, actually we are speaking about the strength and the power of the strength that we have shown. But the question that I wanted to ask you, since you have been working so many years and evolved together with growing up or getting mature, to what extent this happened with your audience and the energy you share with the audience for, let's say, over the past 30 years or so? What are the changes that you notice or see in whatever part of the world, but considering the time?
When we make a performance before we open up, we always present the rehearsal to the local school children. And then we ask them to write comments or to do drawings, depending on how old they are. And we have always noticed that there is a big difference between children or young people who are going to literature schools or scientific schools, children and young people who live in the country or who live in the town. It's like the openness to receive something different varies. When we started, the openness to receive something different was tied to a necessity of development, of evolution, of change. 64, then came 68. Of course, I mean, the whole world was going through a big turmoil of change. And there was a kind of acceptation that a theatre performance could be different from what you expected because of those times. But still, many of the intellectuals, critics, would at times get angry seeing our performances because they couldn't understand, and at the same time they were moved. So they would get angry because they said, how is it that I'm crying and I don't know why? I think that today people accept a little more that not everything has to be understood. That you can also be moved by something that you don't understand. But that probably also comes from this world where so many things are happening that you don't understand. Although they try to present it to you as if it's logical, and but there is no logic. For us, it's very important that the performance is done for the single spectator, so that every single person will receive something which is totally different and will make his or her own montage of the performance. If we perform in a small village in the mountains in Italy, maybe they will say, I haven't understood, but what you do is well done. I recognize that it's well done. In a town, maybe they say, oh, I understand everything, but what do I get out of it? A lot of times when we make performances, we can also get a reaction from spectators. And we try never to ask immediately after the performance, but to get reactions like can be letters that people send you. And we know that for some people our performances have changed their lives. Others remain indifferent. But it is the individuals that we talk to.
For me, it was very interesting from the point of view of somebody who was here today from the beginning of the program, and I'm now trying to connect, as you said, netting, as you mentioned in your performance, the complete
Well, we come from a tradition in which an actor is also a singer, a dancer, a writer of texts, a creator of space. So in our way of performing, many arts which in the Western world have been separated come together. But I would say that for theatre, or for the theatre that I do, one thing is necessary, and it is the presence of one person who is performing and one person who is audience. Now there are art forms like film or like painting where the creator is not necessarily present. So the relationship which is created, which for me is the fundament, is not between two living people, but it is between the work of art and the person seeing it or receiving it. And for me, what is particular of theatre is the presence of the two living people. The relationship. So how this is created. And it is something which in my work as a teacher I insist a lot on, because many actors forget the relationship because they're so interested in themselves that they forget the most important. And the most important is the relationship which is created. Then, of course, you can have discussions about the theatre which is done virtually with the internet connections and perform. But there I have a friend, Helen Valrey Jamieson, who does these cyber performances, she calls them. But I remember that for me, what was very interesting was like when she walked in and she was carrying her laptop on her head. And of course that was an incredibly dramatic moment. More dramatic than when I then saw the images on the screen. So this living relationship is for me like a border which is borderless, but that defines theatre.
Thank you. And maybe just the second question, which is related to the first one, and then I will start asking questions that leave you were also to the others in the auditorium. When you were talking about gender, which is in relationship, I understood as a relationship between the sexes and feminism.
I'm trying to imagine a computer that starts thinking for itself. And of course mine does. It always breaks. You know, when I see performances today, theatre performances, very often I see this horrible little thing here. Yeah, a microphone, which they now make in skin color, as if you can't see it. And of course, I can understand that it can be very useful. My problem is that with the usefulness of this mechanical element, many actors have learned to not use their voice anymore. So they have lost a great amount of their craft because they just rely on the technology. So to see the technology as a development, you have to be careful not to lose what you had before. So if you are able to use the technology and relate with it to grow, and because your particular way of making theatre or art or performance art is developed through these elements, fine. But don't lose your craft. When I see performance art, sometimes I can be very fascinated because I feel that the artist has a path that even though they are improvising, they are developing, they are growing, they are following something which grows. Other times I see performance art which is just an excuse to present something which is not worked on. So, as long as it is part of something which grows in your work, the relationship is created through what you create. But if it becomes an excuse for not working, then I would prefer that it is not considered a development, at least.
Not really. I think technology, it's an excuse.
Sometimes an excuse.
Sometimes something, but no. I am here 21st century. We have these videos. I was studying video art, but I'm not a video artist. I do performances. Sometimes I do performances and nobody knows about the performances. So sometimes it helps me to make the video because I know to that work. And I like to show the people. Yes, I need smoke. Right. So it helps sometimes.
Yes, I'm sure I'm not. I know a lot of people that use video, that use images, projected images, that use laser lights. Of course, and I find it very fascinating many times. I'm just saying, careful that it does not become an excuse for not working.
Yes, I understand. Because the movie was interesting also because they had a lot of documentary movies, even from the 70s. quite very sad because sometimes I don't have Caravan. I'm in the same situation. I have nothing and I can stop out. Today nobody will believe me. So the movie was like 50 years of underground performance artistic.
I don't think they can hear you.
Really? Shit.
But we read the body language, no problem. We understood everything.
No, so from really, it's okay.
Rodila, da se usedejo v krog, to je bila prvotna želja umetnice, da se usedejo v krog. Poleg tega smo se zbrali tudi v tempo in prav zaradi tega, tudi se ponavljam, ne, seveda, ampak spajšala priletela v 6. federacijska vremena predstava in je prišla potem takoj svet, oziroma ki se je imali vse malo neznani. Tako da tisti, ki želite biti, prosim, prijete tu v krog, ker je pošteno do leta zemlje.
What happened?
She just invited people who want to be here to come in this circle so that we can be closer to you. But I guess everybody wants to be here. It's just not enough space.
I have a question. Before you said that your performance touched individuals, so in a way you're changing the world, individual by individual. Now, after all these years of performing, why are you still performing? Is it for self-discovery, for, I don't know, it is the thrill of it, or what is still the motivation, what is driving you to perform after all these?
Once I was performing one of my solo performances in Uruguay, in Montevideo, the Castle of Osterro. And when before the performance, I felt very tired. I thought, I don't want to do it anymore. Maybe I should stop. After the performance, Atahualpa del Chopo came to see me. Atahualpa is the person who founded Teatro El Galpón, which is one of the eldest theater groups in South America. He was more than 80 years old when he saw the performance, and he came to see me and he thanked me for the performance. I felt that small in having said to myself that I was tired before. And since then, I never allow that to happen again. Do you go on until or do you stop at the second verse?